than fraud, and particularly elite fraud. So what was happening all over the world was bankers suddenly going, what if my counterparty bank is doing the same thing that I've been doing? And his asset valuations are bullshit. I don't think I'll make this trade. Right? And markets seized up because of the death of trust. And actually, when you ask bankers, that's what they say about the crisis. So fraud isn't just sort of a little thing. It was an enormous story here. As I said, the good news from the plaintiff's standpoint, and should be from the prosecutors, but it's not happening, is that there is a paper trail. The further good news is that there's a whole series of behaviors that make no sense for an honest lender. If you're going to follow this recipe, then you have two enormous problems. First, you're not allowed to provide that small an allowance when you're making loans that are massively fraudulent and are sure to have massive losses. Your duty under generally accepted accounting principles is to have extraordinarily large reserves. And the failure to do that, because GAAP is included by regulation in the securities law, is a violation of the securities law, which is to say it's a felony, which is to say also it's a 10b-5 action, private right of action. Now, you can't go after the aiders and abettors under the current law, but there are plenty of deep pockets out there because of all these pushbacks. Also, there are all these pushback suits, which are collectively hundreds of billions of dollars at this point. The other problem, of course, is the second ingredient in the recipe. When you make massive amount of fraudulent loans, well, what is a bank designed to do? A big bank would typically have something like 12 different layers of internal controls, all of which are designed to prevent bad loans. And Wendy made the point that all of these things go bad at the same, or essentially the same time, and they must all go bad. Well, we just did the mortgage brokers. Who do you think created the incentive structures for the mortgage broker? Wall Street created those incentive structures, the purchasers. And they did so in written ways in the daily term sheets that said, this is what your bonus will be like. How hard was it, do you think, for them to figure out exactly what was going to happen if you created that incentive structure? And if it was too hard to do that, how long was it before they got reports that these loans were massively fraudulent? Well, you heard Phil emphasize that the FBI warned in September 2004, but the industry's own anti-fraud experts, a group called MARI, and this did this warning in writing, and it went out to every member of the Mortgage Bankers Association, which is to say everybody, essentially. And it said the following three things in 2006. First, these loans are, and I'm quoting, an open invitation to fraudsters. 2, the incidence of fraud is 90%. They reported that study. And 3, these loans deserve the title used behind closed doors in the industry. They are liar's loans. For the reasons we've just gone through, are you going to let your unsophisticated borrower hit the magic secret numbers in the term sheet that are going to maximize your bonus? You're going to leave it up to them? They don't know what the magic ratios are in loan to value. They don't know what the magic ratios are at debt to income. And you got $20,000 riding on this. So seriously, you're going to leave it up to the borrower to get it right? And all the evidence shows that they didn't. It was the lenders who put the lies in the liar's loans, and depositions will show that. And they'll show that very quickly in any of these cases. And that means also prosecutors can work their way up the food chain by flipping folks as well, right? Because once you start making not just kind of bad loans, but unbelievably pathetic loans, you start a chain of lying. And that chain of lying, as Wendy said, had to go through everyone. Nobody could look honestly. Because if they looked honestly, this stuff wasn't just a little bit bad, it was horrifically bad. It could not withstand any honest examination. Any honest review instantly finds this stuff. And the whole thing breaks down. And what do? They create incentive structures that are perverse at every level so that people buy into it. And ultimately, it's the old joke. So we'll give you a sub point that they didn't talk about for good reason. It's deliberately a sub point. We have monoline insurers, and that just means single-purpose insurers, who credit enhanced a lot of these CDOs. But they had, what, $1 billion in capital? Not even that. And they were supposedly credit enhancing $1 trillion of stuff. Now, can they pay? Of course they can't pay. So if you've got a $20 billion exposure to CDOs, you purchase CDOs, allegedly worth $20 billion. At least you're out of pocket $20 billion. And you got a claim for $20 million or $50 million on those things. Are you going to present that claim? Often they didn't. What you got was people for years not presenting really major claims against the monolines. Why? Because they would have collapsed. Right? They would have collapsed the first very large claim. Yeah.
What about, this is maybe a very unsophisticated question, but I get this thrown at me occasionally, and my thinking on it was partly occasioned by The Big Short, reading The Big Short.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the people that say, look, it couldn't have been a major fraud that everybody knew about, because so many of the big investment banks ended up being in a long position and taking a bloodbath.
Okay, so the famous article, or at least should be famous, again, a Nobel laureate, and Paul Romer's not exactly a slouch either, the title says it all: Looting the Economic Underworld of Bankruptcy for Profit. Remember what I said about this formula. It does destroy the firm, but it makes the officers incredibly wealthy. Now, they can stay too long. They can make the bets. Nobody knows when the bubble will pop. So some people will stay too long. But overwhelmingly, what did CEOs do? They walked away extraordinarily wealthy. And indeed, it gets really interesting at the investment banks, because the investment banks, for the reasons we talked about, are sophisticated. So if you're an investment bank, are you going to base people's bonuses on simply the yield? Right, so I got various investment managers handling portfolios at Merrill Lynch. It's a non-random example, by the way. Right? Am I going to pay people higher compensation simply because they invest in riskier assets? No, they'd be crazed, right? The place would go down within days if I did that. So we do it on a risk-adjusted basis. Now, as Wendy said about the rating agencies, and Phil, first, the rating agencies make sure that they never look at the underlying. Second, the rating agencies become consultants as well as raters. Third, they go to premium billing. And guess what virtually every tranche, top tranche, becomes of these CDOs? AAA, right? Now, 5% of straight bonds roughly get AAAs, and 100% virtually of top tranche CDOs get AAA. Right? So that looks like a really, really, really low-risk investment under my firm's system. And I get a premium yield. So, if I'm an investment manager at Merrill Lynch, where do I put my money? So Merrill Lynch purchased this crap, knew it was crap, created CDOs, which it knew were crap, and then largely, compared to the others, kept it in portfolio because it goosed their earnings stream so much of the managers. Right? So yeah, does it kill Merrill Lynch? Absolutely it kills Merrill Lynch. But is that inconsistent with fraud? No, because the whole problem in law jargon, modern law jargon, this is agency problems and econ jargon and such. But that's, a bloodless phrase, again, a euphemism for fraud in these circumstances. All right, I have to dash to my next presentation at the other room.